What's your go-to karaoke song?
I am such a terrible singer that I'm not sure there is such a thing as a go-to karaoke song. There's an old song a lot of people today haven't heard of called 6 Days on the Road. And there's something about when I sing that song, I feel like I'm almost a different person. But trust me, nobody wants to hear me sing it. When I was 14, I worked for a company called Lawn Care, care spelled with a K. I had to get out there at 6:15 every morning and be at the shop, and we were cutting grass by 6:30. If you were to ask my wife, it would be that I still chew my fingernails. I was 17. My older brother got me to go see this band called Big Brother and the Holding Company. Janis Joplin, the lead singer, stepped over me as she was going to the stage, and she had this long paisley skirt on, and I just wanted to see what it felt like. I wasn't trying to pull it or anything, but I just touched it. She looked down at me, and then with a big smile, she went, "Down, Tiger, down." It was a brush with greatness. Everyone thought that I didn't pay attention and that I didn't care about when I met people, that I couldn't recognize them. When you process what a face looks like, you put it in your memory bank, you can't access that information again. I could spend 2 hours with someone at night, see them the next morning at Starbucks, and I honestly wouldn't recognize them. When I was in the restaurant business, obviously it was a nightmare. In politics, it's kind of a nightmare, but you learn to adapt. If someone looks at me like they know me, I greet them like an old friend, because I just trust that I actually know them, I'm just not recognizing them yet. That overcompensation actually turns out to be I think a good life skill. More of us probably could benefit from being friendlier when we first meet people. Colorado was the first state to legalize recreational marijuana. Part of that also meant that we were more aggressive in medical marijuana as well. A lot of people came from other states for the medicinal benefits. There's a guy named Bob Crawford who is the bass player for a band called the Avett Brothers. And his daughter, Hallie, when she was 22 months old, had brain cancer, had these incredible seizures, and cannabinoid was the only thing that would work. When the Avetts would play Red Rocks, that was where you could get cannabinoid. People's lives have been changed and in many cases saved by the medical benefits of marijuana. I believed in an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and I believed that the death penalty had a place. But when I became governor and had the responsibility of actually making the phone call first thing in the morning and telling a prison employee that they had to take another guy's life who wasn't any risk to society, it was inherently unjust. The kids that got tried for the death penalty generally came from low-income backgrounds, were generally kids of color. I'm an Episcopalian, I'm not a Catholic, but the Archbishop was the first one who sat me down and said, you know, if you're a Christian, all of Christianity is really based on the New Testament, and the New Testament is not an eye for an eye. It's about forgiveness, and only God takes a life. I flipped, I switched. I gave this kid, Nathan Dunlap, I stayed his execution. It almost cost me my re-election. I don't regret it. It was a difficult journey, but the death penalty is long overdue to be gotten rid of. It's been eliminated in almost every industrialized nation except ours. I got elected mayor of Denver in 2003. 2 weeks after the election, but 4 weeks before I was inaugurated, a 15-year-old African-American kid named Paul Childs was gunned down in his own front hall. An inexperienced police officer killed him. The community rose up. I went to his funeral, and this is 10 years before Ferguson, but we created a civilian oversight board to allow the community to really decide how their neighborhoods would be policed. We created an office of the independent monitor, so allegations of police misconduct could be investigated with a power of subpoena outside the control of the mayor's office or outside the control of city council, that could be a true independent investigation. And then we went and made sure every single patrol officer got crisis intervention training, CIT training. We made sure they had less lethal tools that they're to use in different situations. We created something called the discipline matrix that meant that instead of a slap on the wrist, the bad apples, the police officers that really shouldn't be on the streets, that we could actually fire them if they lied about the circumstances of a situation or what actually happened. When I first got elected mayor, I teased my predecessor, Wellington Webb, who was one of the great mayors of America, and was African American. I teased him I was going to have double his diversity. And I ended up with 50% people of color, I had 60% women. Every case, I had incredible talent. And 2.5 years after I was in office, I was, Time magazine called me one of the top 5 big city mayors in America. It wasn't me, it was this team, and it was the diversity of that team that created that excellence. Oh, they think just because it's a funny name that there's no substance. When you're campaigning for President of the United States, you feel burned out probably a couple times a week. Make sure you get enough sleep. You don't let the schedule drag you out. Part of it is, eating more healthy meals and making sure you keep some regular routines in place. If I was going to just do one, I think healthcare right now, the cost of healthcare and how fast it's spiraling out of control is probably the most important. I'd like to see more specifics on each, how are we going to address the cost inflation of healthcare? How are we going to prepare and retrain all those people that are going to lose their jobs to artificial intelligence or, automation? I want more specifics. I love my son unconditionally. I've seen him at every stage of his life. As he has evolved and emerged as a free-thinking, independent young man, I feel like no matter what he says or where he goes or what he does, I might not agree with it, trust me, that happens anyway, but that I'm always going to be connected to him with a type of love that's unbelievably powerful. I don't think I really should have the right to pick, but if I was going to pick somebody with emotional depth and a real intellect that spans issues, I think Daniel Day-Lewis could do a pretty darn good job.
I am the President of the United States of America, clothed in immense power.
Depending on the day of the week and the context, I will rotate between, either the F-bomb or just say, if it's something small, it doesn't matter that much, suffices. And if I get really mad, then I use the F-bomb. I can get by on about 6 or 6.5 for a few nights, but generally I need about 7.5, 7, let's say, on a regular basis. I think Instagram, it's so conducive to a narrative and allows, I think, a broader array of emotions that isn't such a flashpoint always. It isn't easily hijacked by the haters. One of the great tragedies in the history of Colorado occurred at the very end of November in 1864, the Sand Creek Massacre. Almost 200 Cheyenne and Arapaho, most of them old men and women, were not able to escape. They were massacred. And it was actually celebrated in Denver. I made, on behalf of the entire state, a formal apology for the Sand Creek Massacre. It was something that was long overdue and I think meant a lot to helping us go forward. If we're not able to look back and acknowledge and deal with, own what happened in the past, we're not going to have a successful future. When I first ran for mayor in 2003, I said I was going to run a positive campaign. There were 5 other candidates. 4 of them had amazing lifetimes of public service. And I said I wasn't going to be the one who attacked them. The professional consultants told me I had no chance of winning. But in the end, I think when you're in these jobs, you got to put your heart and soul into trying to figure out what is the best answer, what's the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And then you got to do it regardless of what the consequences are.